Adam,
Yeah,
is this an ad?
this is an ad for Mutinex. Mutinex are a marketing mix modelling company.
Why do I need one of those?
Well, then you can model the return on every single marketing decision you do.
So you wouldn't do an ad like this?
You'll never have to do an ad like this ever again.
Mutinex Growth OS, your best decisions start here. For more information or to request a demo, visit mutinex.co. That's MUTINEX.co.
You know, you and I grew up in a world where we walked into every room with great conviction that we had the answer based on, good intuition and good homework and due diligence. This is walking into a room without the answer, putting work in the world to find the answer.
Welcome back to Black T-Shirts. Hi, Adam.
Hello, Brent. How are you?
I'm good. Now, look, I thought today we'd explore the state of strategy in agencies. And, of course, you are a strategist, so I'm sure you've got a strong point of view on that.
Yeah, some people would argue with that, but but yes, I have been called a strategist before.
When does strategy work well and when does it maybe not?
When you talk about strategy, I honestly still don't know what you mean. And there's like brand strategy, there's comm strategy, there's media strategy, there's social media strategy, there's earn strategy, there's business strategy. Give us a bit of a hand here. What are you talking about?
Well, I guess brand and creative strategy.
In creative agencies, the brand strategist is rolled out to do brand strategy. The account service team are not allowed to contribute to that. And then the brand strategist kind of rolls out, says their kind of opinion on Nye, and then the creative monkeys receive that as a brief and go away and do their thing. And that whole dynamic shits me a little bit.
Why?
Because it disempowers the account service people from their brains, and it also makes a kind of a baton passing relationship happen from the strategist to the creatives. And the whole thing also, at its worst, feels artificial and post-rationalized.
So what you're describing there sounds like a very traditional way to think about strategy. And the reason I'm excited to have today's guest on, Wanda Pogue is the Chief Strategy Officer of VaynerMedia, which is anything but traditional. I'm sure our listeners have heard of VaynerMedia. They are an absolute juggernaut, which have had incredible growth over the last few years. And it's an agency that believes in building brands social first. Now, Wanda is a classically trained P&G planner at Saatchi, where her reputation was as one of the best planners in the United States. And then she moved to this social media agency. So it'll be really interesting to talk to Wanda about how that strategy process is different at Vayner, how maybe she's had to rethink the way she does strategy. And it's really awesome to welcome her all the way from New York. Wanda, hello.
How are
Thank you
Wanda?
for having me.
This will be fantastic.
I am doing really well.
Hey, Wanda, I'll also be interested when we get into it in your role in the creative process in that transition as well. But before we get into all of that kind of stuff, just tell us a little bit about who you were, and maybe start off at school. So what were you like at school, and when did planning hit you in the face as the career you must have?
Oh, I think I stumbled into this industry. So native New Yorker, grew up in New York, went to school in New York. I actually went to school at night while I worked as a receptionist in a marketing research company. And while I was working as a receptionist, I was asked to kind of join, the project management team, so kind of start learning about research, qualitative, quantitative research, turned it into a full-time job. And while I was there, really kind of developing my skill set in marketing research, I was given an opportunity to interview at a multicultural agency. And that's pretty much how I started. I started in client partnerships, but that's how I started my career in advertising.
When I say school as well, what if I said primary school? What were you like as a little kid?
They call that elementary school.
Oh my God, I was like
elementary school.
And like elementary school.
Yeah.
A good kid, and I know that's going to sound pretty boring, kind of sat in the front of the class. I wasn't necessarily, the constant hand raiser, but I wasn't the kid who got in trouble.
Yeah.
Took good notes, did my shit, and followed rules and order. And it wasn't probably until a little bit later that a bit more corrupted, where maybe I cut a class or two, but that didn't happen until like high school.
And Wanda, were you curious about people? Like, did that sort of curiosity for people and how they work? And that's always been there.
Yeah. Whether it was interested in psychology or just the way human relationships, what inspired people, what made them tick, what got them excited. This is funny because I was always called among my friends the Barbara Walters, for people who know who Barbara Walters, was just somebody who was always asking questions, always curious, and always interrogating and investigating, if you will. So I think that's why it made sense that I ended up starting, like in marketing research, and then kind of, that has its limits because you learn a lot, but you don't actually get to apply it to anything. When you work in research, you just, you pull a report together and you hope that somebody maybe implements it. So that's the reason that I kind of made the move into advertising.
Yeah, that sense of responsibility sometimes is missing, isn't it? You can do this, this, and this, and this, and this, but then you kind of hand it over and go, good luck.
Exactly. Let's see what you do with it.
And so from those humble beginnings in a multicultural agency, which here in Australia is a strange concept. We never really, right? We don't really have multicultural agency.
We've got a few.
But it's less of a thing.
It's less of a thing.
Like it is in America. But how did you go from there to working on some of the biggest global Procter & Gamble brands?
Saatchi was a really interesting place. So I worked for the multicultural agency that was owned by Saatchi at the time. And, Saatchi didn't really care where you sat. If they saw good talent, they pulled good talent into, different projects. Then I was working on P&G, doing U.S. Hispanic, and they needed somebody to kind of, help lead a global project that, where Mexico was one of the biggest markets. And because I was fluent in Spanish, and good at my job, they gave me the opportunity to kind of, lead the research project. It was, on a laundry brand. And then that just gave me exposure, I think, to the right people. And, then I found, my champions who pulled me from U.S. Hispanic to lead Latin America regionally. And then from there to do what we call general market here in the States across like a number of P&G brands.
And in the end, how many years and how many brands was your Procter & Gamble journey?
Wow, way too lots of years. The interesting thing is that I'm still working on Procter. So I would say maybe like 25 years working on Procter. I was at Saatchi for 19.
Yeah.
And I've touched pretty much every single category. So I started in fabric care and led Tide for many years. Worked in beauty care, leading strategy for brands like Olay, worked in hair care, on Head and Shoulders, worked in baby care on Pampers, and then a bunch of other categories.
And during your time at Saatchi and Saatchi, you were a strategist for nearly all of that time, or all of that time, really. How do you distill what you did at Saatchi's and how you contributed to the creative output of that agency?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much what you described in the beginning. We had a very, very traditional way of working. Clients brief you, you then take the brief and translate that into your own brief, and probably do some extensive, research up front to kind of get you to the brief. And then that was pretty much handed over to creative. Now, I always had the good fortune to work with creatives that wanted me involved in the process. I've always believed that I make the creative work better. So I wasn't one of those strategists that were normally pushed out. But for the most part, you would turn your brief in and have a dialogue and then wait for 2 weeks, and for creatives to turn around and come up with their creative concepts. You evaluate them, you pull together a wonderful presentation, you walk into the room with great conviction, and you sell your idea. So that was fundamentally the process.
Now, we're going to come on to how it's different now that you work at Vayner. But before we do, I think you're being very humble there, Wanda, and underselling what you do up front, because you have a real superpower around insights. So when we used to pitch at Saatchi Saatchi, obviously worked with Wanda, and Wanda would do these unbelievable books. Which do you remember? Of course you remember Wanda. You used to put the heart and soul of these books, and what they were was she'd go and do a bunch of research, and Wanda would uncover all these insights into the consumers in the category and put them together in these books, and they would just wow the client. Now we'd go on to not win those pitches most of the time, but Wanda did an amazing job.
They always love the strategy.
They love insights. So Wanda, I think insight is one of the most abused words in marketing, right? I think a lot of people call observations insights or data insights, but they're not proper insights. How do you think about an insight? What is an insight? What makes a good insight? And how do you find them?
Sometimes they get confused with observations and even facts. For me, an insight has a job to do, and it is meant to unlock creative. So I've stopped debating whether it's an observation, whether it's a human truth, whether it's a fact. For me, the most important thing is that it's grounded, in human understanding, and that it actually does the job of unlocking creative. And sometimes that unlock can happen with the most amazing fact. Like, I always look to Like a Girl, because when they found, how young girls were impacted, and the moment they go through puberty, how their confidence kind of declines, that may be, and they had, and I can't remember the exact stat, but that was a huge unlock. So that is a human truth, that is a fact, but it also serves as creative inspiration. So for me, that's the most critical thing. Does it help you unlock, great creativity? Because it has a job to do. And if it doesn't, then it's probably not a good insight.
I really like what you're saying, and because what I really don't like is this quest for a deep, penetrating human insight, because very often, A, they're not there. It's all been explored. And B, It doesn't necessarily help. We had Justina Moore talking about Pringles, and your hand can't fit in the can of Pringles. Now, that's not a deep, penetrating human insight. That's a behavioural observation. And I love that idea around facts as well. A fact, 3% of women see themselves as beautiful. That led to Dove's campaign for real beauty. That's not an insight. It's just a fact. And then, there's a whole body of work behind that.
Yeah, but isn't that sort of what we were sort of alluding to at the start, that sometimes strategy can feel a bit self-serving, looking for the very beautifully articulated human understanding, as opposed to, I love the way Wanda expressed it, it's got to unlock creativity. Otherwise, all it is a set of words that lives in PowerPoint.
Exactly.
It's got to. So how do you know How do you know when you got one that's going to unlock creativity? How do you sort of think about that?
Yeah, but that's where I think like the partnership between strategy and creative is so absolutely critical, because the things that I can get really excited about, and I have, may not necessarily, be as exciting to a creative. And I think it's that relationship and that conversation, and that back and forth that can actually, that's how I know if I put it in front of a creative and we can have a dialogue around it, and we can start ideating. And I think that that's been the biggest shift in the way that I work now, maybe with the way that I worked before. I think before it always felt like it needed to be a bit of a ta-da, and I was presenting it to creatives and hoping that they would like it. And in my case, I was very fortunate, and I think I had good insights, whether some of them were human, behaviors, or some of them were, real human truths. And I was fortunate enough that I was able to have those conversations. But I think that unless that dialogue happens, you don't really know. So that to me is really essential. That partnership and that collaboration, I think is key for getting to great work.
And then you see the core relationship of agencies now being structured around someone who thinks about strategy and somebody who thinks about creative. And that kind of feels like the core relationship of new agency models now, which I think is really interesting, because I think you're exactly right, Wanda. You don't really know. And you don't know until you start talking about it and start trying to generate ideas. Yeah. And then if they do start to flow, it is the right insight. If they don't, it's not.
Yeah.
So your years weren't wasted. You did some productive stuff there at Saatchi and Saatchi and so on. But now
It was wonderful.
But tell us.
And I got to meet amazing people
Yeah,
like Brett
yeah.
with them.
That's right, Wanda. That's right.
So tell us about how things are different at Vayner.
Vanya?
Vanya?
Are you making up? Is this a Polish
Isn't it
digital
Vanya?
agency called
Hang on.
Vayner. Gary Vaynerchuk.
Oh,
Vanya.
VaynerMedia.
Oh, can we edit that out?
No,
Dylan?
we can't edit that. We have
Okay,
to
fine.
keep.
I thought you would
We
say
have
that.
to keep
All
that
right,
in.
fine.
We have to
So
keep that in.
Vaynerchuk.
We can work on it. We
Yeah,
can work on
yeah.
it.
I've heard of him.
I mean, it's different. It's different in a couple of different ways. I mean, first of all, what I'll say is the reason that I ended up going to Vayner, in addition to kind of wanting like a really fast MBA and everything social and digital, is because when I first met with Gary and he kind of walked me through, the model that he was kind of implementing and the way to kind of get to big ideas, I was fascinated because, in this industry, there can be a lot of blah, blah. And what he was proposing was something so simple and very, very human centric and very consumer driven, consumer led. And, if Brent once described me as the most human, strategist he had ever worked with, and that's true. I think if there's something that truly stands me apart is the fact that I do believe that, spending time and getting to know your consumer is time well spent, and truly understanding them is really how you get to, great observations, insights, what can lead to really great work. So when I met with Gary, he talked to me about his model, and it's about driving relevance at scale. So that to me was like really interesting. He said, for brands to really be able to win today, they need to be relevant to more people about more things. And if you're classically trained, you usually have one consumer audience and you have one insight and you have one idea. So that started to kind of disrupt everything that I had kind of built as a foundation. And then when we started talking about the consumer, the challenge was, how can you truly be relevant to all moms, 18 to 49? It's almost impossible because people are so different. So that's really what appealed to me.
But Wanda, wouldn't you say, though, that the way you appeal to all mums, or be relevant, to all mums 18 to 49, is you find a universal insight? I mean, you used to do it for not just mums in one country 18 to 49. You used to do it for mums in Brazil, mums in Japan, and mums in Russia, right? I mean, you were able to find these universal human insights that could work for global brands, right? So do you now think that actually didn't work?
I think that there's still a place for that, but how you get to that insight, how you get to that idea, I think is what's a little different.
Mm-hmm.
And then also what you do throughout the entire funnel is also what's a bit different.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that you asked like what's different. So as opposed to starting with one broad target, which arguably, could lead you to very kind of vanilla work at times. What we do is that based on the client's objectives, their challenges, everything that we go into as strategists, we identify numerous cohorts, up to 25, different subgroups, so think of them as nuanced groups of current and potential customers that your brand may be able to win with. And with very specific demographics and psychographics and behaviors. And you really understand what those nuanced groups kind of, need to hear from your brand and what's really going to resonate with them. Because I think the beauty of, of social today is that you can actually, target those people, whether it's with paid media or organic, the creative is the variable and the creative will find those people. So what we do is we find right. What does that mean? You put out messages that are very, specific to these individual cohorts about your brand. So you put out into the world all of these social media ads, which are increasing your awareness and trying to connect with people. And once you put out that work, we introduced an entire discipline within strategy that's called the post-creative strategist. And what those people do once there's work that's live in the world, is that they literally mine every single comment and every single interaction with the creative that's out, that's live, let's say. And based on that, we look for the momentum, so we can then identify with confidence what's really resonating with people, what's motivating people to take action. And that's how we define, the right idea. And then that big universal idea, Brent, kind of comes from there. So that's what we mean when we say finding right, and you learn your way to what should get the biggest investment. And I think that that's what's been fundamentally different, because, you and I grew up in a world where we walked into every room with great conviction that we had the answer based on, good intuition and good homework and due diligence. This is walking into a room without the answer, putting work in the world to find the answer. So a little bit different. And I think that's been really enlightening. So it's a very different process. And because of the way the process is, it's not like you're one and done. You write the brief and then you walk away and you go to your next brief. You literally stay involved throughout the whole entire process, because it's all about finding and building on the momentum as it happens.
And so just keep going. So you've got your 20 pieces of work out there to 20 different cohorts. One of them floats to the top. Then what?
A lot more than 20. There could be hundreds of pieces, out in the world. And once we identified like what's really resonating, you break it down. You read the comments and you learn like what's connecting with people. What is it that they like? In some cases, and it's interesting because people give you a lot, so we worked on Durex, and someone said, oh my God, this is so good. This should be a music video. And we literally took, that content and exploded it into an amazing music video, really along the lines of, because everyone was asking, why is this Durex ad on my For You page?
And is the goal in that example of the music video to then pump that out to all the cohorts, or are you still staying? So you are still trying to go for mass communications that reaches everybody and creates behavioral change, but your way of going about it is to create loads and loads of different pieces and see which one works best, as opposed to being strategic.
Well, that's still strategic, isn't it?
No. Well, that's my question. As opposed to having a defined point of view as to where the brand should go and what the brand stands for.
No, I would say we're still trying to get to that. And in some cases, we've defined, a brand's purpose. We've defined a brand's idea based on what we're learning. I think it's a more certain way, and a more confident way of making an investment as a brand.
I think we often spend a lot of time in agencies. We sort of get to this one brief, and then we go, what are all the creative ways in? We explore all these creative ways in, and then we narrow it down again to the 3 or 2 or 1 that we're going to present, and then ultimately, get the client to buy.
And so not only do you narrow it down, I think, but, clients make changes to it, then we make changes to it, and, then we make changes to it again. And what goes out into the world is very usually a far cry from the idea.
So with this sort of process, does it tend to just get into market faster, less watered down, more sort of, just because there's less, is that because there's less writing on it? We're making 20 things, 100 things. We're not investing as much production. So we'll test, we'll learn, we'll see what happens.
I mean, we don't like to call it testing, but I think you learn and you have more certainty in terms of where the right answer might be. And the other thing is that each and every piece of content that you're putting out into the world is actually meant to build your brand.
Adam,
Yeah?
is this an ad?
This is an ad for Mutinex. Mutinex are a marketing mix modelling company.
Why do I need one of those?
Well, then you can model the return on every single marketing decision you do.
So you wouldn't do an ad like this?
You would never have to do an ad like this ever again.
Mutinex Growth OS, your best decisions start here. For more information or to request a demo, visit mutinex.co. That's mutinex.co.
So how have you structured the agency in order for you to do that? What's different about the structure of the agency that allows you to put lots of stuff out into the world against lots of different cohorts of people quickly?
So two things that I think are fundamentally different in the way that we're structured is the investment that we've made in both creators. Obviously, they sit within the creative department. These are people who are very skilled on all of the different platforms. Many of them which, have had their own brands, so they're very familiar with the platforms and making very native content.
Before you give us the second one, can we just push in on this a little bit? Because this is something Adam has been passionate about for a long time. Why do you always say, why do we hand our ideas off to production companies to go and make things? Why don't we make them ourselves, right? You've talked about that a lot.
Which we do. Why don't other agencies do
Sure.
that?
Sorry, you do that.
Sorry.
Think about. Yeah, that's fair. So Wanda, what's interesting about this is you're hiring creators who know how to make social content on the platform. So you're not going to the classic advertising schools to get classically trained advertising people. You're actually looking for creators who know how to make things on the platform. Yeah, you got a bunch of those people inside the agency.
Do you have conceptual creatives and making creatives? So are they different people?
We have more classically trained creatives, and so your more traditional copywriter, art director, ECD, GCD, all of the above. But then we have a very heavy, base of creators as well.
And do those traditional creatives, do they come in more post once you know what you're scaling, or do they also come in early on concept to come up with ideas?
Our philosophy is that everyone needs to be a practitioner. So even the more classically trained creators make.
Okay.
And that's something, even our CCO makes for many of our brands. So it's a very different culture.
Don't have any antiquated creatives. It's interesting.
They wouldn't survive.
No, this is good. This is great. This is interesting. What's number two? How else have you structured yourself differently?
Within the strategy department, the role that we introduced, which is the one that I was kind of mentioning before, they're post-creative strategists. So, it's a good number of them are, what we would have called maybe junior strategists, but their role, and I think this is also important because we're all practitioners. So even in my title as CSO, I'm also a post-creative strategist. So it's my responsibility to be in the comments as well, to really know what the consumer's saying, how they're reacting, and to also have a good sense, not only of how our work is resonating with the individual cohorts, but what's the competition doing and how is their content performing? So just really having your ears to the ground and based on that, building your strategies from there. I think for us, the most important thing is that we look at social and the learning you can get from social as, a real-time, ongoing insights machine. So I'm pretty classically trained in research, mostly quant and qual. And for me, this is the new quant and qual. It is out there and it's just putting value on what the consumer says to find the answers moving forward.
In this series on the podcast, we're going to have one of Australia's most successful publishers come and talk to us. And Brent is obsessed with publishers being better at marketing than marketers because they are always they understand the relationship. They don't turn away after they've put something in market. They have to understand the cadence of their consumer and constantly talk to them. And you've borrowed a bit of a publishing model there in how you're talking about people's relationship with creativity and the brands. That's fascinating. Is it just the two? So the client comes to you with that expectation. You obviously tell them that's your model and they either go no or yes and they buy into it.
Well, and just on the client thing, I think the bit I'm really interested in is you talked before, Wanda, about how we used to walk in the room very convicted that this is the right idea, right? Do you find it easier to convince clients to be bold, brave, buy creative work with this model than the old model?
Yeah, because you prove it out. And I think I'll give you two examples, and I never know what clients you can talk about and what clients you can't. But
You're allowed
on
to talk about them
Planters.
all. That's fine with us.
Yeah.
you have our permission to talk about all your clients.
But on Planters, it was really interesting because, they had been doing Super Bowl for a couple of years.
So this is
and
peanuts,
they wanted,
right? Planters is peanuts?
Yeah, Planters Peanuts. And they came to us with a new brief. We were briefed in a very similar way as we would have been briefed, when I was at Saatchi. And it was a mixed nuts brief, and
that's Adam and I, mixed nuts.
Huh.
See what I did there?
But what we did, and we did all the due diligence, great brief to kind of kick it off. We had different cohorts, blah, blah, blah. But the creatives came back with like about 4 different concepts. And in the meeting, they all felt viable. And what we decided to do is that we were going to start putting social media ads out into the world to get learning. And one of the ideas really rose to the top. It was a very simple poll, and it came out of our brainstorm that we were talking about how people eat mixed nuts. Some people eat them where they eat them one at a time, and some people take them by the handful and throw them in their mouth. And it kind of ignited a little bit of a debate when we were in the room in terms of, oh my God, is that how you eat them? Oh shit, no, eat them like this. And I think based on that, we put out a poll just asking the world how they eat their mixed nuts. And not only did people respond, and we learned that it was almost like evenly split, but there was such an opinion around, people that eat them differently.
But that's just America. I mean, you ask America anything and you get...
Yes, I know, incredibly. But that's the idea,
right?
that it led to, the divisiveness in eating mixed nuts and how to eat them. And we were able to walk in with great conviction that we had an idea that we knew was going to be incredibly successful. So that's one example. So I think it does give you more confidence, particularly when a client is about to spend $6 or $7 million on a Super Bowl ad.
Yeah, absolutely. And you guys have done a lot of Super Bowl, right? Like this sort of starting in social, finding the relevance, scaling the relevance has led to quite a few Super Bowl spots over the last few years, right? Like you guys are doing multiples.
Yeah, because also with clients that we work with, and we're working with one client right now, what we're doing is taking the learning, from the current work that we're doing, and we're finding those nuggets that then will serve as the briefs. So I think there's less ta-da, because by the time we get to the client, they've been on that journey with us. They know what's kind of resonating. And it's not resonating in the focus group where you're paying people. It's actually resonating in the real world. And the amazing thing about consumers, again, is that they let you know why. I don't need to guess at what the insight might be or what might be connecting with them. You actually can do what we call a very socially informed campaign.
In the post-strategy world where you're assessing which bits of creative...
Not post-strategy, post-creative
world. Are you...
You got it, Adam.
Yes. Bloody hell.
At Vanya. At Vanya, in your post-strategy role at Vanya Media.
There might be something in that from what I'm hearing, though, with all due respect. How do you know, I assume you've got different cohorts who are using different forms of social media. What type of research are you doing to weigh up the kind of the engagement or the likability of one cohort against one piece of creative in one message versus another? And how are you assessing which is working better? How do you literally assess which bits of creative are working better than others? Are you comparing likes on Facebook against sales in Mexico, or? So
it depends, and where at times we are measured against sales. So, then it's really easy, when we control the media, and it's paid, we do get sales data back, and that gives us, confidence, of course. When it's organic, it's, based on the level of engagement, but also the quality of that engagement. And in cases where we're over-indexing, what normally is the response from the consumer. So we don't really believe in virality per se, because every category is very different. You can tell by reading comments, if there's real momentum there and if people are getting excited over something. And the other thing that I'll say is that not every cohort gets the same piece of work. So what resonates for me and what I may need to hear about a brand, the benefits specifically, and, the how to use it or whatever the case may be very different than what Brent needs to hear about a brand so that he may go out and buy it. And I think that's the other thing. We don't look at it as just one job to be done.
Now, what we like to do on this show, Wanda, is we like to talk about a specific piece of work so that we can really sort of unpack the thinking behind it, the process behind it. I mean, you've spent a lot of time already on the process, so I feel like we're starting to understand that. The piece of work that you worked on at Vayner that we'd really like to talk about, it's for toilet paper, a really high involvement category, right? Toilet paper, Scott toilet paper. Do you want to tell us a little bit about sort of the business challenge and the brief that you started with on this one?
So it's one of the many toilet paper brands in a highly commoditized category, with very, very low interest, where there's no real loyalty. The brand had lost relevance, like a lot of brands, and kind of its reason for being. When we started off, working on it, it was about kind of identifying, driving relevance at scale, and who we wanted to win with. So we did all of our cohort work, and there were always two pillars for Scott toilet paper. One was very rooted in value, because it is a value-based brand. It's a lot less expensive than the more premium brands in the market. We identified cohorts, for value and our messaging and put out messages against value. And then there was another pillar that was also really important. It's a one-ply toilet paper.
Sounds terrible.
Good God.
But really, really important, because it allows you to flush more successfully.
And Wanda, within this sort of it doesn't clog benefit, were there multiple cohorts there as well? Or is this something that women care about more than men, for instance? Or did you see different cohorts there?
Lots of different cohorts, but you have homeowners, you have obviously like with people who have cesspools, which are very big outside of cities. You have obviously dads who, oftentimes are the ones that need to fix the problem.
That's right.
You have
that's what happens in my house.
So no, we had many different cohorts for that message as well. And we started putting out, social media ads. They were fun. Some of them were funny. And as we were reading the comments, what we realized, people were quite explicit in sharing their horror stories, and it was such an anxiety builder, the reality of having to deal with a clogged toilet or being the one who clogs the toilet. And we had so many people kind of sharing their stories. But the one thing that came across is that the fear was real. Everyone wanted to avoid what they had experienced. So that's where the real insight came through.
And one-ply toilet paper, to me, just feels thin and cheap. But by talking about declogging or the risk of clogging, you're turning that weakness into a benefit, right?
To a strength. Exactly.
So,
and when you talk about the anxiety of clogging someone's toilet, that hits home for my co-host.
Look, I'll just tell you a quick story. I was in New York quite a few years ago now, and there with my girlfriend. We went and visited her glamorous friend called Nikki Bell, who is now the CEO of a Saatchi office somewhere.
She went to Meta. I think she's at Meta.
Oh, she at Meta,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay. So we were all going to go for a walk in the big park there in
Central
Manhattan.
Park.
And before we went for the walk, I had to go use the toilet, and I used the loo, and then we all went for a walk. When we came back, the whole toilet had clogged up. And not only had it clogged up, it had expelled itself.
Uh-huh.
And so when I'd gone to the toilet, it was now on the floor.
In the apartment?
Oh my God.
And
that's horrible.
It was horrible, right? And there was water everywhere. I'd been to the toilet that was now on the floor. I was really, really embarrassed. Nikki was disgusted. And I haven't spoken to Nikki since this story.
That was
Wait, have you seen her since?
Haven't seen her since.
See?
Mortified to this day about what happened on that day. Now this is a cathartic moment for me, because hopefully Nikki will hear this and get back to me.
If you're listening, Nikki, Adam's really sorry.
I am still sorry about what happened. It wasn't my fault though. It was the plumbing in the building.
Or was it the toilet paper?
I should have used
one ply. You should have used one ply, Scott. So Wanda, you're getting this feedback that clogging's an issue for people that's resonating with people. So then, how did you scale that learning?
So normally, what we do is, we'll put out, something on social media, an ad on social media. We saw that it was doing well. We do then what we call amplify. So then off of that insight, we'll put more things out into the world, to really kind of understand, that we just, get lucky that one time, or is there really a there? And so we put out a few more pieces and we saw, okay, definitely there's a lot of traction here. There's a lot of momentum, which is what we look for. And then we just scaled it, and for us, when we make content, a bigger piece of content, and our goal is to create something that consumers are really going to want to engage with, something that doesn't necessarily feel like advertising. We call them Vayner videos. It's just content that if you were to ask people in the real world, what is this? They probably wouldn't say it's an ad. It feels more like the kind of content that they want to engage with.
So in this case, it was a long form, 3-minute. And what happens?
It's a 3-minute horror movie about somebody who clogs the toilet in their...
Adam, it's like your story.
It totally is my story, almost.
But the context is important. It's a story of a young woman who's visiting her boyfriend's parents for the first time, right, Wanda? That's the horror story, right?
Is it meant to be a kind of a homage to a Jordan Peele style horror movie, or am I reading too much into it?
I mean, we would like to think so. So yeah, sure.
Okay, but is that deliberate to kind of latch onto things happening in culture at the time?
Yeah, very much so. We have a whole, other department within Vayner that's called Platforms and Culture. We call it PAC. And it's really about honing in on what's resonating both culturally and on platforms. And we try and leverage that because it's just a way to be able to kind of amplify your message.
So lots of cat videos.
No cat videos, but that's done.
So it definitely got some traction in social. And how many people watched this 3-minute video? YouTube, I presume, was your main channel for it, or?
I don't have I should have.
But millions, right? Millions.
Exact number.
Millions watched it. And did it sell a lot of toilet paper?
It's had a great impact on the business as well. And I think the reason why is just here you have a brand that wasn't top of mind for people, and a brand that certainly wasn't, thought to have any kind of cultural cachet or any kind of personality, and so it successfully put it, on the radar. It gives the brand greater, saliency, when they go to buy it, it takes up more mental space. And you also gave people a real benefit. You reminded people of, why they should buy Scott.
Yeah.
And it's not because it's cheap. There's a real value to it, in terms of what it can help you avoid. And we connect it with people. And the verbatims were great. It was a brand that, not only gets you, but it's a brand that's funny and quirky and, and then a brand that I kind of want to interact with. So it's done so much for the business. And we actually did a part 2, no pun intended.
Oh, number 2. It's interesting you say the verbatims are great, Wanda, because we get our own verbatims on this show. We wanted to see whether your clogging video would pass a pub test here in Australia. So we've put it in front of some real consumers in a pub, and here's what they had to say. The pub test is brought to you by Dealy, the insights platform where ideas go to grow.
Would I really watch a 3-minute video on YouTube? Yeah, I reckon I would.
Nah, I'd be skipping it.
Yeah, if it was good. Yeah, I reckon I would.
Does showing the negative help me see the positive benefit of the product? Yeah, I guess it can. And it's actually a real scenario that I think toilet paper can be the issue.
But I guess it's like in COVID. Buy toilet paper before buying food.
Yeah, I guess it's like be prepared, but that was really stressful.
It wasn't funny because it was true and it happens a lot. And I don't really know why I should be using other toilet paper brands.
I think it's great. It really captures the feel of normal tropes of a horror movie and place them with the focus on toilet paper, but I don't know if it makes me want to change toilet paper brands.
Would I consider changing toilet paper after seeing this ad? You think it's a mini movie, a bit corny in parts, but still very clever and entertaining, and yeah, I guess I would.
Wow, that was a lot. I took out of that if you're at your in-laws' place, bring your own toilet paper.
She was nervous and embarrassed and shit happens. Try new toilet paper, I guess.
I think it's funny, but it doesn't really make me want to change toilet paper, so no, it doesn't pass the pub test.
Does this pass the pub test? Yeah, I think it's clever.
Yeah, it passes because it was funny.
So that's the pub test.
So great.
Yeah. It's pretty good. We've got a bit more research. We've got a few more results for you in a sec. But what do you think of those so far? How does that make you feel? Do you reckon they're on the money?
That's awesome. That's awesome. Absolutely love that you guys put it in front of people. Love your pub test. And I'm, I put a lot of weight and credence on what consumers say while they're having a beer.
Well, I'll tell you a little bit more. So the pub test is powered by a insights platform called Ideally. 51% of people said it didn't pass the pub test, but that's the bad news. The good news is 28% kind of really resonated with the idea, and they said they felt similarly stressful in those kind of situations. 86% of people thought it was distinctive and well-branded. Overall, people found it funny, humorous. To get people to want to change their toilet paper on the basis of one ad is nigh impossible. So it's pretty good results.
I love it. I wrote all that down. Thank you.
But you must be sitting here going, but we didn't need to worry about how it worked post because we already knew pre, right? Like, because you've done all the work, you know that this is going to resonate, right?
And look, they're a very conservative client, and this was an easy sell.
An easy sell.
Yeah, it was an easy sell because we had walked in with a lot of that, with all of the data based on the work that we had been doing. And part two was also an easy sell because we didn't rest on the laurels of this. It's a value-driven message. So we wanted to make sure that we were hitting the right notes on value. We put out a lot of social media ads because obviously there's lots of different ways to talk about monetary value. And based on some of the work that we were doing, we found great traction and sold in, number two.
Speaking of number two, I'm going to give you my own personal opinion on the actual ad. I loved it. I love the fact that it was a play to, I think it was Get Out, the movie. I love the idea that you've turned a weakness into a strength. There was only one line I didn't like in the ad, which is the last line, where she says, it was only a pee. And I can't imagine a pee would clog the toilet like that.
Do you feel like they maybe...
They softened it.
Softened it a little bit at the end.
And the implication was always it was a number two.
I don't think that was necessary. But what I will say is that there's an insight behind that because women don't like to admit that they do number two.
So
it was
she
a
may
number
not
two.
have been telling the truth.
No, but it was a number two, and she's trying to cover it up by saying it was number one. That's even a deeper...
We'll never know.
As we'd expect
we'll never know.
from you, Wanda, that's an even deeper insight into the psyche of women and toilet paper. Now, what I like about it too, Wanda, is that you made a 3-minute film. So because I think, there's so many people who talk about we live in this social age and people have short attention spans, so let's make a 6-second thing. But I mean, how can you change people's perception
that's not true,
about
though.
a brand? Yeah,
people will watch the things that interest them.
Yeah.
And it honestly doesn't matter how long they are. Look how long people, scroll on TikTok for, because what's being served to them are the things that they're interested in. So I call bullshit on that. I think people are more than willing to give you their time if the things you put in front of them are of interest to them.
You know why I like Ideally, Adam?
Why, Brent?
It's fast, You get insights overnight. And I think the main thing is it's not trying to test whether an idea should live or die, but it's trying to give you real insights that you can build on and make the creative better.
That sounded like an ad.
Because it was.
Do you know why I like Ideally?
Why?
Because they sponsor the black T-shirts.
They do.
If you want to do a pub test on your own, don't. Go to Ideally instead.
That's right. Visit goideally.com. That's goideally.com and find out how they can help. The thing that I'm fascinated with your model. I mean, it's a really interesting model, and obviously it's leading to really interesting work. How do you manage the tension between, at the start of the process, we're making 20 things and we're going to get them out to the world, so you've got to make them fast and cheap and lots of them. And then you go, hang on, now we're switching gears. Now we're crafting a 3-minute long form piece of film, which needs a whole different level of craft and storytelling and character development and all that sort of stuff.
That's the best question of the hour, I reckon. I love that question.
Well, thank you, Adam.
The way that the teams are assembled, you have an ECD, so you have your creators that are making, like the daily content that's going out into the world and even putting out the larger content. And then, once we find the momentum and are ready to go, our ECD and our CCO are obviously really involved. We also have our own production company. This is interesting, Brent, you would appreciate. It's Eva Nordstrom, which is Madison Avenue spelled backwards. And it was a little bit of the FU to the industry, that you can actually make great content like the video you just saw without having to spend a fortune.
When you're doing Super Bowl, Wanda, do you roll in the A-grade directors as well? Do you work with people outside, or do you try and make it all yourself?
Yes, I mean, we have, and we have it, so it kind of depends on the concept, and exactly what we're doing. So both.
How much did you charge for that 3-minute film?
Don't know.
Okay. Hey, Wanda, we're going to have to wrap up. You have been a wonderful guest. It's so impressive to see you move from, first of all, quant research, then into quite the traditional planary role to this kind of avant-garde, post the idea strategy world, and kind of feels like on the bleeding edge of where a part of where our entire industry is going. So it's just fantastic and great to hear you speak so insightfully about that. So thank you very much for all of that. If you were going to wrap up your entire creative philosophy and put it on a black T-shirt, what would your creative philosophy be?
And you don't get to make 20 T-shirts and put them out
them
to different cohorts and get them to tell you which one is the better T-shirt.
I would say the little idea is the big idea.
The little idea is the big idea. Explain.
So all of those different social media ads that go out into the world are a little idea. They're the beginnings, and they're the small idea that gets put out into the world. And then based on what we see and find, we find the bigger idea.
One of the little ideas is the bigger.
One of the 20 little ideas is the bigger.
Yeah.
The little idea is the big idea. We like it very much. Wanda, thank you for being.
Are you going to send me a T-shirt with that?
We might if we can get our shit together.
We used to do that.
Yes, we will.
Wanda, I can picture you already walking the streets of out there on Long Island wearing your the little idea is a big idea T-shirt.
Wanda, if you promise to take a photo of yourself in Manhattan wearing said T-shirt and post on your socials, we'll send you one.
Done. Promise.
Unreal. All right.
Wanda's one of the most stylish people I know. She's never wearing a T-shirt. Hey, Wanda, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for being so generous with your time. It's getting late there in New York, so thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. It was great fun, and I'm so nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too. Lovely.
And Brent, always good to see you.
Wanda, you're the best. See you later. Thanks for your time. So let's come back to where we started.
Mm-hmm.
Strategy feels like it needs to be reinvented.
I find Wanda so refreshing. That was the best conversation I've had with a strategist in years because I felt like she was taking strategy somewhere new. And I feel like how they were approaching it obviously has its strengths and weaknesses and so on, but it just felt fresh. And so I loved it for that.
Because one of the great ironies of the agency business, such a creative business in so many ways, and yet when you look at agency models, the way agencies work, it doesn't feel that innovative for most.
No, and it's around the world. I think the independent and the newer agency models are winning because the traditional models are finding it so hard to restructure themselves because they rely on that kind of historical brand planner, account service, creative kind of model. And those ruts are really, really deep. And so coming back to Wanda, how she's able to reinvent herself and plonk her into what does sound like genuinely a very different way of operating is really good. It's really interesting.
But I think the important thing that can't be lost is that she is a brilliant, classically trained brand strategist.
Kept on coming back to insights.
So I think that's the bit that can be lost here. You can go, oh, they've got this great model and it's all about social. And there are so many smart young people in our business who really understand social and really understand how to use those platforms. But when you combine it with the traditional great insights, great brand positioning, the sort of stuff that Wanda can do, you put those two things together, I think that's when the magic happens, right? I think often we get too binary about you're a brand person or you're a digital person or you're a social person, whereas when you can combine the best of both those parts of our worlds, I think is when we get to really interesting ideas, right?
I agree, and even on the example used, it wasn't just a 3-minute film. There was 2 pillars to the brand they had to kind of keep on improving about one ply and about value, and they were very, very deliberate about that. And even though the film went really well, the next film isn't a double down on one ply. They're going back to the other pillar, which is around value and so on. So they are thinking about things strategically. And she also seemed like a very evidence-based insights planner as opposed to an intuitive planner or a bullshit planner whose days are kind of numbered as well, I think.
Yeah, and also I think a planner who's absolutely in service to the work, right?
Yeah,
which I think is so important.
Absolutely fantastic. Good on you, Bram.
Good on you.